An introverted young woman, someone who'd spent her whole life tucked behind a screen. She leaves her laptop behind at a quiet cafe, and the one who returns it is, of all people, a reclusive tech millionaire posing as a barista. He invites her into a secret project, but the closer she draws to him, the more she's forced to confront the fear that's haunted her for years. Do I even deserve this? Some doors only open when we dare to knock. Thursday afternoon passed in silence. The sky hung heavy and grey, like an old tablecloth left out too long, and the city wrapped itself around its hurried people like a cold blanket stitched from fatigue. Lena sat in her usual corner of fable, Steam, her fingers lightly skimming the keyboard, though her gaze kept drifting to the streaks of rain newly clinging to the window pane. Outside, the traffic moved with the slow, weary rhythm she'd lived by for years, steady, hushed, and unnoticed. The laptop in front of her wasn't just a machine. It held unfinished drafts, lines she'd typed in the small hours when sleep wouldn't come, quiet designs she once dreamed into being, but never dared to share. Somewhere among those folders was a version of herself she kept hidden, tucked away as deliberately as the seat she always chose, out of the sun. She glanced at the clock. 6:48 p.m. Later than she thought. The chill had crept in fast, and the fear of missing the last bus sent her into a flurry. Half a cup of coffee left behind, headphones hastily wound, shoulder bags slung askew. She slipped out of the cafe like a shadow withdrawing from the frame, quick, quiet, unseen. The wind slapped her cheeks, her loose hair whipped up as if startled awake from a dream. Lena walked fast, then ran across the street, heart stumbling in her chest, not entirely from the rush but from a sense of unease rising within her, the vague feeling that she'd left something behind, something her mind hadn't quite caught up to yet. Only when she dropped onto the bench at the bus stop and reached out of habit to open her laptop did the cold emptiness stop her. No keyboard, no screen, nothing. Her heart skipped in one long, aching pause. Lena shot to her feet and sprinted back down the street, her shoes gliding over the wet pavement as though chasing her own. Growing panic. But when the cafe came into view, all she found was a glass door sealed shut. A small closed sign swayed gently on the other side, quiet, polite, unyielding. She pressed her hand to the window, holding her breath as she peered inside. The warm lights were gone. No voices, no movement, only her own blurred. Reflection stared back, lips tight, eyes wide with disbelief. That night, Lena didn't eat. She couldn't. It felt like something inside her had turned against itself, that familiar weight of shame whenever she made a mistake. She sat curled in her tiny rented room, yellow lamplight flickering across books and taped-up sketches, and wondered if she'd be able to forgive herself if the laptop was truly gone, not because of work, but because it held a part of her the world had never seen, a part she didn't know how to speak aloud, so she tucked it there. On her phone screen, she typed a message. "Hi, I left a grey laptop at the cafe this afternoon," but erased it. The words made her feel careless, like she was inconveniencing someone when the fault was entirely hers. She curled into bed, hand resting over her chest, where her heart hadn't settled since leaving the cafe. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. The city had returned to its quiet breath, the rhythm she had always followed but never quite belonged to. Just before midnight, her phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. "I have the laptop. Meet me at the cafe tomorrow morning. 1. Line, no greeting, no name, no explanation. Lena stared at the screen for a long time. She didn't move. In the darkness of her room, the glow from her phone lit her face in a strange, suspended halo, like she stood between two worlds, one shaped by constant fear, the other by something just beginning to unfold. She didn't write back. Not because she didn't want to, but because in that moment she understood. Some things don't need words, and like that message, like the fading afternoon, like a forgotten object that somehow might be exactly how fate chooses to begin something entirely new. The night passed like a trail of mist, quiet, barely touching. Lena didn't sleep. She lay still in bed, listening to the delicate sounds around her, the faint ticking of the clock, the soft tapping of wind against the window pane, and the ceaseless churn of questions inside her. Who had sent the message? How did they have her number? And more than that, how did they know the laptop was hers? She tried to coax herself to sleep with logic. In the morning, she would go to the cafe, retrieve the laptop, say thank you, and leave. Simple, neat, just like every way she'd ever interacted with the world, polite but contained. But the world, it seemed, had no intention of sticking to script. At exactly 11:22 p.m, there was a knock at the door. 3 soft, even taps. As if the person outside wasn't trying to startle her, just gently knocking on the surface of her reality. Lena sat upright. In that moment, everything she had always feared, strangers, surprises, losing control, rose up at once. And yet a small part of her walked to the door. Through the tiny peephole she saw him, the barista. The man who wore plain t-shirts and wiped glasses with the slow, quiet rhythm of someone playing a silent song. He stood there, a canvas tote in hand, shoulder tilted slightly. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes had a gentleness that felt like a whisper. She opened the door. Said nothing. Neither did he. He simply held out the bag. "You forgot this," he said, his voice low and soft, as though afraid to disturb the fragile stillness between them. Lena took it. Her heart thudded louder than necessary. The tote was familiar in her hands, its weight reassuring. She didn't need to check, she knew it was her laptop. And yet, something inside her still felt unsettled. She looked at him. Wanted to ask, "How do you have my number?" Or "How did you find where I live?" But the words caught in her throat, stuck behind something larger, trust, doubt, or a feeling she didn't yet have a name for. He didn't step inside. Didn't make small talk, didn't try to close the distance. He just stood there in the narrow courtyard outside her door, framed by soft yellow light and the dense dark beyond it. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than the wind. He nodded, then turned to go. "Wait," she called out without knowing why. "How did you—" He turned back, his gaze skimming across her, landing somewhere deep within. Not intrusive, just quietly knowing. "A laptop you can return," he said, with the faintest smile. "But there's something else. I hope you'll find again." Then he walked away. No explanation, no goodbye. The door closed behind him, but the echo of his words lingered in the hallway, slipping into the small apartment, settling in the air like dust catching light. Lena stood there for a while, as if staying still long enough might help her understand what he meant. She set the bag on the table and pulled out the laptop. Everything was intact. Fingerprints still on the trackpad, the unfinished email. Glowing on the screen, a half-completed design open in another tab. And strangely, she no longer felt panic. Not relief either. Just something quiet filling the space where fear had been. Not because the object was returned, but because someone had brought it back without needing a reason. That night, for the first time in months, she didn't dream of running. Instead, she dreamt of a cafe where someone had left a cup of hot tea waiting just for her. The next day, Lena returned to Fable and Steam. She arrived earlier than usual, carrying a small paper box. Inside, a heart-shaped butter cookie she'd baked herself. It wasn't perfect, but it was carefully wrapped, simple and sincere. She wasn't entirely sure why she'd come back. Maybe to say thank you. Maybe to understand something more, or maybe just because. Last night hadn't quite finished what it started. The cafe door opened with the familiar chime, and the warm scent of coffee and old wood wrapped around her. His eyes found her the moment she stepped in, as if he'd known she would return. She walked to the counter, placed the box in front of him, said nothing. He looked at it, then at her. Not surprised, not waiting for an explanation. He simply smiled. "You bake?" "Not well," she murmured. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For returning something you lost?" He tilted his head, his voice laced with a quiet tease. Or for something I didn't name? She looked up at him, then quickly looked away. He chuckled. Not awkwardly, not to fill silence, just gently. Coffee? He asked, reaching for the machine. The usual, she replied. He understood. He always understood the short answers. Some people don't need full sentences to be heard. They stayed quiet for a while. He made the drink. She looked around. The new painting on the wall, a tiny cactus in a fresh pot, and the old wooden chair she always chose, still in its exact spot, as if waiting for her. When he slid the cup in front of her, their eyes met again, so in that look was something unspoken, not quite affection, not quite distance, a pause between caution and curiosity. I used to live in the city, he said, once she was seated. She blinked. It was the first time he'd volunteered anything about himself. New York, he went on. For a long time, good job, the kind of busy life people like to brag about. So, why come here? She asked softly, as if afraid to disturb the story. He leaned on the counter, gazing out the window where a woman passed by, walking her dog. I used to think I needed to be heard, he said. But what I really needed was silence. His words caught her off guard, not because of what he said, but because it mirrored something she'd never admitted aloud. No one here asks me what I'm doing with my life, he continued. They just hand me coffee and smiled. I like that. You seem okay, she blurted, in peaceful. He smiled. Maybe. Or maybe I've just gotten good at playing the part of someone who's figured things out. She stared into her coffee. Steam rose, softening her reflection in the glass behind the counter. She saw herself as something unfinished, blurred, not quite formed. And you? He asked, as if he already knew the story she hadn't told. I'm not sure where I'm going, she whispered. Just moving forward. Moving's fine, he said. As long as you can still feel the wind. Lena said nothing. But this time it wasn't from a lack of words. It was because there were too many, and silence was the only way to hold them all. They sat that way, for a long time, neither in a rush. Time slowed, not for any grand reason, but simply because neither of them wanted to leave too soon. As she rose to go, he handed her a small, folded piece of paper. This, if you ever need more quiet, he said. She opened it a little. Way down the street. Inside, in careful handwriting, it read, "Sometimes it's okay to let life take you the long way around." Below it was an address, not the cafe, somewhere else, a meeting point or an invitation. She didn't know. All she knew was that, for the first time in years, her heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from something that felt remarkably like hope. She hadn't planned to look up his name, at least not right away, but that afternoon, after returning from the cafe, with the scent of coffee still lingering on her hands and the folded note still crumpled in her pocket, something stirred inside her. Not suspicion, curiosity, or maybe just the quiet ripple that comes when you realize a page is missing from the story you're reading. She didn't know his full name, but once, while waiting to pay, a little girl had called him Eli, and in an earlier visit, when he handed her the receipt, faint pencil scribbles beneath the word Barista had read, E. Miller. It was enough. She sat before her laptop, sunlight fading across her room, and typed into the white glare of Google, Eli Miller, Startup, New York. Within seconds, the results poured in. Photos of him, white shirt, grey blazer, standing at a tech conference stage. Headlines flashed by like waves. Young CEO breaking fintech boundaries. Founder of buzzed-about financial startup makes abrupt exit. Each one chipped away at the version of him she'd held in her mind. The article she clicked on was from 3 years ago. It spoke of a company called Zentra, once valued in the hundreds of millions. Its founder, Eli Miller, had abruptly stepped down during the final round of funding. No explanation. Speculation abounded. Shareholder conflict, burnout, depression, even loss of direction. But no answers. Just silence. He vanished from the tech world. No interviews. No statements, no trace. And now, that man was behind the counter of a small-town coffee shop, wiping glasses and smiling at customers, like nothing existed beyond the froth of a cappuccino. Lena leaned back in her chair, not out of disappointment, but from the sheer weight of it all. She felt like a background character who just realized she was in the middle of a story she didn't know the plot to. His words, "I used to live in the city. I needed the quiet," took on new gravity. They were no longer gentle confessions. They were truths, heavy and human. She felt closer to him, and at the same time impossibly far away. And then that old familiar hum returned, like a wrong note struck in a song she was just beginning to learn. What do I have to stand beside? Someone like him. She didn't speak the question aloud, she didn't need to. It lived beneath the skin, just behind her throat, inside every blink. The next day she returned to the cafe. He was arranging cups, back turned to her, as always. But today, she saw him differently. The way he wiped a white ceramic mug no longer seemed like routine. It felt like the gesture of someone who had once touched the world bare-handed, and now chose to do it another way, softer, quieter, but no less intentional. He turned and saw her. "The cookie was really good," he said. She nodded, but her eyes couldn't hide the weight of what she knew. You founded Zentra, didn't you?" she asked, her voice tight, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. He didn't flinch and didn't ask how she knew. He simply exhaled and set the mug down. "I did." "Why did you walk away?" she asked, quietly, without accusation. Looked at her longer than usual. "Because I used to think I was the center of everything," he began. "Then one day I realized I was a stranger to the life I was living." "And so you chose to disappear?" she asked. "Not to disappear," he said. "To search. For the part of me I'd lost while chasing what everyone else said I should want." She didn't respond. But maybe she didn't need to. They stood there mid-morning with the hum of the espresso grinder and soft jazz spilling from a hidden speaker. And inside her, something shifted, gently, like a door nudging open. She left the cafe later than usual that day, and for the first time as she stepped outside, she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt like someone who had just begun to belong. She returned to the cafe 3 times that week, not because the coffee tasted better, not because there was more to say, just that, in that space, she could breathe easier. It felt like explanations weren't required. As if nestled between the wooden counters and pools of amber light, there was a small corner of the world where no one was measuring her, no one peering too closely. A space where silence was allowed to exist, respected even. On Friday afternoon, he waited for her with 2 cups of ginger tea, no coffee and no sugar. Just warmth and calm, they sat by the window. The late sun slanted across the table, casting a long streak of light where her hand rested quietly. He spoke first, direct but unrushed. "Lena, I'm working on something new." She looked at him. He didn't sound like he was pitching, and he wasn't the kind of person who preached. It felt more like he was sharing something private, an invitation to step into a quiet world he was slowly rebuilding. Not a company, not a startup with shares and press releases, he said. Just a small platform, a way for young people to learn about finance and tech, free, safe, like a communal kitchen for ideas. She didn't speak. "And I want you to be part of it," he added, meeting her eyes. Her heart pounded, not from excitement but fear. She let out a small laugh, reflexive. "Me? What could I possibly do?" He didn't answer right away, but his silence wasn't dismissive. It was patient. "You draw," he said eventually. "You write, you feel. You know how to touch the world in ways most people can't. Don't you know that?" She looked down, her fingers curling into her palm beneath the table. The past swept in like a cold wind slipping under a door. The day she graduated college, she'd sent out 5 internship applications. Not one reply. The only response she ever got was a rejection. Polite, polished, and still, she cried for hours after reading it. After that, she chose safety, admin work, organizing files, quiet roles that let her disappear inside systems where no one looked too closely. No expectations and no disappointments. Why me? She whispered, as if asking the wind. Because you're different, he said. And maybe you haven't realized yet that that's the most valuable thing of all. He wasn't flattering her. He was naming something he believed, but to Lena, it felt like a light aimed at parts of herself she had spent years trying to keep hidden, and instead of warmth, it scared her. She didn't say goodbye when she left the cafe that day. She walked quickly, as if fleeing her own reflection. Dusk fell earlier than usual. Back in her room, she opened her laptop, staring at the screen. There was a draft in her inbox. The subject line read, "I'd like to try." It was a letter. She once meant to send to a non-profit, meant to, then didn't. She opened it, read it again, then deleted it. His voice echoed in her mind. "You don't see that as the most valuable thing." But another voice spoke louder, the one shaped by every past failure. "You're not good enough." She closed the laptop, turned, off the light, lay still in the dark. That night she didn't dream, just a long stretch of blankness, like her mind had grown too tired to build even the smallest hope. It rained for 2 days straight, a quiet, steady rain, as if someone were gently, patiently tapping questions into the earth that had yet to be answered. Lena didn't return to the cafe during that time. Not out of anger, not to avoid him on purpose. She just wasn't sure how to meet his eyes again if it happened. She went to work, came home, repeated the motions of daily life. But everything felt slightly off, like the hour hand of a clock nudged off its axis. Things moved as usual, but nothing felt the same. Inside her, something was shifting, like a long-locked room beginning to crack open, letting in slivers of light. That night, the rain stopped. The air afterward carried the scent of wet earth, and a hush settled into each stair she climbed on her way home. In front of her door, tucked neatly in the frame, was a small card. No envelope. No ribbon, just a folded piece of cream paper with a single line written in blue ink. "Opportunity is a door. You just have to push." No signature, none needed. She sat down right there on the threshold, card in hand, night air lifting her hair. She read the line again, much then again, as if repetition might help her believe it more. She didn't sleep right away. For the first time in days, she opened her laptop, not to check work emails, but to start something else. A blank document. She didn't know what she meant to say, but she typed, "Maybe I'm not as skilled as others, but I want to learn. Maybe I'm slow, but I'll keep going. Maybe I've missed a lot, but this time I want to try." She deleted it all, opened her messaging app. His name was already there. He'd messaged her once and she'd never replied. She typed slowly, fingers trembling just enough to notice, "I want to try." Just 4 words, short, but the hardest ones she'd ever written. She didn't send it right away. Let it sit, took one deep breath, then pressed send, a soft ping, no fireworks, no soaring music, just a small act, like nudging open a door, slightly ajar. But beyond that door, it was a different road, a new chapter, a version of herself she hadn't yet met. Not long after, her phone buzzed. His reply was simple. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Cafes closed. We begin." Lena smiled, not out of joy, something quieter than that. Lighter. Nothing held her inside the old shell anymore, and the rain had finally stopped. The next morning, the sky was impossibly clear. No clouds, no wind, and the light, soft as silk, seemed to settle gently on everything, even the worry inside her. Lena arrived 10 minutes early. Standing at the back door of the cafe, her hands trembling slightly, she reread the message as if to make sure it hadn't just been a dream. But the door opened. He greeted her with a nod, no need for words. The air between them was calm, not from familiarity, but from having crossed that thin threshold between fear and trust. The room behind the cafe was modest but alive. A long wooden table, mismatched chairs, a few whiteboards leaned against the wall, scribbled with markers in every color. On the table, laptops sticky notes, and 3 other people. A woman around 25 with chestnut curls, carefully lining up sticky notes. A guy with glasses typing furiously, and an older man who looked like he kept the place running, wires and all. They all turned to her and smiled. No one asked, "Who are you?" It was as if they already knew she'd be there. "This is Lena," Eli said simply. "She's helping with content and user experience." "Hi, Lena," the woman smiled warmly. "I'm Ivy." "Logan," the guy nodded. "Developer." "Call me Henry," the older man said, grinning. "I fix whatever these kids break." She nodded, smiled back. The meeting began. No formality, no PowerPoint slides. Just people talking about ideas, about the problem they wanted to solve. How to bring financial knowledge to people who had never been taught. Never believed they had the right to understand money. Eli outlined the platform's framework. Logan walked them through data flows and security layers. Ivy was testing interface layouts. Everyone spoke with passion, but without overpowering each other. They gave space. They listened. Then Eli turned to her. "Lena, if it were, what would you want to feel the first time you opened the site?" She froze. All eyes turned to her, not tense, just waiting. She took a breath. Her hand instinctively brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think," she began, her voice quiet, "it should feel warm. Not like an academic site. More like stepping into a kitchen, where someone's waiting with a hot cup of tea, not pushing you to learn, just letting you know you won't be judged for not understanding something." She fell silent, not daring to look up, but no one laughed. Ivy was the first to nod. "Yes, I love that. I'll try warmer tones in the layout." "You just gave me clarity on something I've been stuck on for weeks," Eli said, gently. "Thank you." Lena stayed still. But something inside her broke open, not painfully, more like the soft shattering of fog on a mirror. And for the first time, she saw her own reflection clearly. The meeting ended near noon. Everyone rose, making plans for the next session. Ivy waved. Logan gave her a thumbs up. Henry laid a kind hand on her shoulder. "You're a beautiful piece of this puzzle. Stick around, okay?" Eli walked the others out. When he returned, it was just the 2 of them. "Your first day," he said. She nodded. "And nothing like I imagined." "No one's first day is," he replied. "But sometimes." "That's exactly right." She looked at him. Then around the room, not polished, not corporate, but real. And for the first time in a long time, Lena didn't ask herself, "Do I deserve this?" She just knew. She wanted to come back. The morning light slanted softly into the room. Not bright, not dramatic, just a quiet beam filtering through the old window pane, casting itself across the wall where the whiteboard hung. The board was blank. Below it, a blue marker lay still. As if waiting for a hand, Lena was the first to arrive. No one had asked her to come early. No one expected her to lead. But today, she hadn't come for anyone else. She set down her backpack, picked up the marker, and stood before the E. Bored like it was the first page of something only she could write. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from knowing this moment would never come again. A beginning, if it could be called that. She wrote slowly, each word a breath. Everything starts when we believe we can. The line wasn't perfect, but it was hers. The door creaked open. Ivy entered, hair in a loose bun, holding 2 cups of coffee. She read the words, said nothing, just set a cup in front of Lena. Her hand brushed Lena's. Light, certain. Next came Logan, hoodie wrinkled, smile half-formed, but his eyes lit up when he saw the board. He slid into his seat, opened his laptop. The project's interface glowed to life, the logo still temporary, the name still undecided. Henry arrived last, carrying a small potted plant. He placed it by the window, right in the sun. "We'll see if it survives," he said, winking. "Like you kids." And finally, Eli. He didn't speak, just stood beside Lena, their eyes meeting in a quiet nod, like a blessing. "You're exactly where you're meant to be. And it's time." They gathered around the board, a shared breath. A space so safe it needed no filling. Lena stepped forward and added a single period to the end of her sentence, not to finish it, but to begin. The scene shifts. Montage, slow and steady. Ivy adjusting layout colors, squinting at the screen. Logan demoing the first user flow, quietly thrilled. Henry connecting wires, testing the sound system. Eli placing a blank notebook on the table, writing in clean strokes on the cover, Project Echo. Lena turned to the first page and began sketching the logo, not for perfection, just from feeling. As the camera pulled back, wide shot from above, we saw a weathered room, a small team, young, imperfect, unpolished, but building something. Real in that moment. They didn't need success right away, they just needed to believe. What they were creating mattered. Maybe the magic wasn't in the success. It was in the decision to begin. Lena looked out the window. Her hand wrapped around a still warm cup of coffee. She smiled, softly, but undeniably. Maybe you're like Lena too, carrying something beautiful inside you but never quite daring to share it. And if you believe that sometimes all it takes is the courage to begin, then like this video and subscribe to the channel, because there are so many stories like this waiting for you, just behind the doors we finally choose to knock on.